Morning, everybody. David McCoy, Ochimo Properties, Real Estate Matters. I'm continuing this series on commercial real estate, frequently asked questions, and today I thought we would talk about land leases. Land leases tend to be kind of regional. There are some places where people do that a lot. In my particular area, there are some people that do some land leases, but they're relatively few. In fact, in a typical year, you'll have very, very few, maybe no land leases that are done. But a land lease is what it sounds like. Instead of buying the land, you would lease the land. And I would say that normally that would be the landowner that makes that decision. I suppose you could go to someone who has something for sale and talk to them and say, hey, would you consider leasing it? But it doesn't happen very often in my area. There are areas where it's much more common, but it doesn't happen much here. A land lease, sort of by its nature, is almost always very long term. And by long term, I mean 40 or 50 years, maybe even 100 years. And I guess one of the advantages is that you don't have to pay for it all up front. You pay a monthly rate, and you pay that for the life of that lease. It almost has to be that long of a lease, because if someone is going to lease that land, presumably so they can build something on it, the expense of building a building, especially if it's a large building, is so large that you couldn't possibly have that make sense economically unless you had a very long lease. Part of that is you can't even recover your cost. For building a building, you have to depreciate the value of that building over its lifetime. And for a commercial building, that's typically, say 40 years to do that. And then if you, over that period of time, you do any additions or modifications, those also have to extend for around 40 years. And so you just can't recover your cost if you don't have a very long-term lease. Now, I guess I will offer a couple of exceptions to that. Let's say that maybe you're a trucking company and you don't plan to build anything at all. You just need several acres to put tractor trailers or trucks. And you don't necessarily, it may not be something that will be forever. In that case, you might be able to get a situation where you would lease the land for a shorter period of time, maybe 5 or 10 years. But normally, it won't make sense for either party unless it's a very long term. For the landowner, they typically just want to hold on to it, and often in that lease there's a decision about what will happen to any buildings that are built on that land during that lease. Sometimes, and probably more often than not, there's a requirement in the lease that requires the land to be returned in the same condition that it was delivered. So a number of years ago, probably 10 or 15 years ago, there was a very large hotel. It was a convention hotel, and it was near our state fairgrounds and convention area. And it was a very large hotel, and it had been there for 40 or 50 years. But it had been on a land lease. And they did own the hotel, but they did not own the land. And so when that lease expired, they demolished the building. The entire building was torn down to return that land to the owners in the same condition it was in when they bought it. And that can be a requirement. It is possible that you can return it. Sometimes the lease will allow you to return it with the buildings in place, but the landowner would then own those buildings. When you return it to him, he would get to keep it. He would not have to reimburse you for it or anything else. But I would say probably most of the time they're going to ask that those buildings be turned down. So that's sort of the basics of a land. Anyway, that's probably the basics of land leases. If you have questions about that, please let me know. I'd love to answer any questions. Also, if you like this video, please feel free to like it for me. If you know someone who you think would benefit from it, please hit share. And if you'd like to see more of these, please hit subscribe. I want to thank everybody for watching, and thank you for your comments. If you have comments or questions or topics you'd like me to cover, please send me a note or write something in the comments below. I love to hear from you, and I would love to offer more. Thank you so much, and have a great day.